I'm Trevor Trout,
I'm Ben Heights.
and we're talking about dueling. So, dueling started as a less violent way to solve disputes in the European Middle Ages. It was thought that God would pass judgment during a duel and save the quote-unquote right person.
Dueling continued as a popular means of establishing honor and settling differences. For hundreds of years, it quickly established itself in the New World where, like many things, it reinvented itself.
While duels had been long fought over a woman's hand or defend a man's honor, in America, dueling took on a new importance. It was used to settle political differences. The duel that took place between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr is perhaps the most well known, but it was not uncommon in politics. We'll dive into that duel a little bit later.
Freedom of speech and politics were cornerstones of the new country. To besmirch a man because of his beliefs was not taken lightly. Political rivals such as senators, governors, and mayors were challenged.
Principally, duels were held to defend one's honor, but the duelists were also trying to prove themselves as leaders. They wanted to be brave, determined, and single-minded. A challenge could not be ignored, or a career would be destroyed.
Dueling was very much a public matter. Insults and the challenges to duel that followed traveled via newspaper editorials, word of mouth, and plain old gossip. They also reached a widespread public with postings at street corners and taverns.
Few men could resist such a public challenge. Even Abraham Lincoln was called to duel. He had referred to one man as a smelly, foolish liar in a newspaper editorial. Lincoln chose swords over pistols in the hope that his long arms would offer an advantage. He eventually apologized and avoided the duel altogether.
Newspapers at the time were factionalized and expressed very distinct viewpoints. Editors were constantly being challenged and were known to carry sidearms at all times, even in the office, in case an irate reader would wish to dispute an editorial.
By the time of the Broderick-Terry duel of 1859, slavery had become the new reason for dueling. Dueling had lost favor in the early 1800s in the North, but still remained the dispute-solving method of choice in the South, where social standing was a touchier subject.
Although 18 states had outlawed dueling by 1859, it was still often practiced in the South and the West. Dueling became less common in the years following the Civil War, with the collective public opinion perhaps soured by the amount of bloodshed during the conflict.
And eventually, by the start of the 20th century, dueling laws were enforced and it became a thing of the past. So the duel was the final skirmish of a long conflict between Democratic Republicans and the Federalists. The conflict began in 1791 when Burr won a United States Senate seat from Philip Schuyler, Hamilton's father-in-law, who would have supported Federalist policies. The Electoral College then deadlocked in the election of 1800, during which Hamilton's maneuvering in the House of Representatives caused Thomas Jefferson to be named president and Burr vice president.
Hamilton's hatred towards Burr was severe and well documented in personal letters to his friend James McHenry. This quote from one of these letters on January 4th, 1801 shows his bitterness. "Nothing has given me so much charging as the intelligence that the federal party were thinking seriously of supporting Mr. Burr for president. I should consider the execution of the plan as devoting this country and signing their own death warrant. Mr. Burr will probably make stipulations, but he will laugh in his sleeve while he makes them, and will break them at the first moment it may serve his purpose." In the morning of July 11th, 1804, Burr and Hamilton departed from Manhattan by separate boats and rowed across the Hudson River to a spot known as the Heights of Weehawken, New Jersey, a popular dueling ground below the towering cliffs of the New Jersey Palisades. Dueling had been prohibited by both New York and New Jersey, but Hamilton and Burr agreed to take the duel to Weehawken because New Jersey was not as aggressive in prosecuting dueling participants as New York.
The same site was used for 18 known duels between 1700 and 1845. They also took steps to give all witnesses plausible deniability in an attempt to shield themselves from prosecution. For example, the pistols were transported to an island in a portmanteau, enabling the rowers to say under oath that they had not seen any pistols. They also stood with their backs to the duelists.
Burr, William Peter Van Ness, his second, Matthew L. Davis, another man, and the rowers all reached the site at 6:30 a.m., whereupon Swarthout and Van Ness started to clear the underbrush from the dueling ground. Hamilton, Judge Nathaniel Pendleton, and David Hosack arrived a few minutes before 7. Lots were cast for the choice of position in which second should start the duel. Both were won by Hamilton II, who chose the upper edge of the ledge for Hamilton facing.
However, Joseph Ellis claimed that Hamilton had been challenged and therefore had choice of both weapon and position. Under this account, it was Hamilton himself who chose the upstream or north side position. The duel took place near the area where Philip Hamilton was killed in a duel with George Eaker 3 years earlier.
All first-hand accounts of the duel agreed that 2 shots were fired, although the seconds disagreed on the intervening time between the shots. It was common for both principals in a duel to fire a shot at the ground to exemplify courage, and then the duel could come to an end. Hamilton apparently fired a shot above Burr's head. Burr returned fire and hit Hamilton to the lower abdomen, above the right hip.
The large caliber lead ball ricocheted off Hamilton's third or second false rib, fracturing it and causing considerable damage to his internal organs, particularly his liver and diaphragm, before lodging in his first or second lumbar vertebrae. According to Pendleton's account, Hamilton collapsed almost immediately, dropping the pistol involuntarily, and Burr moved toward him in a speechless manner before being hustled away behind an umbrella by Van Ness because Hossack and the rowers were already approaching.
It is entirely uncertain which principal fired first, as both second hands' backs were to the duel in accordance to the prearranged regulations of the duel, and so that the men could later testify that they saw no fire. After much research to determine the actual events of the duel, historian Joseph Ellis gives the best guess.
Hamilton did fire his weapon intentionally, and he fired first, but he aimed to miss Burr, sending his ball into the tree above and behind Burr's location. In so doing, he did not withhold his shot, but he did waste it, thereby honoring his pre-duel pledge. Meanwhile, Burr, who did not know about the pledge, did know that a projectile from Hamilton's gun had whizzed past him and crashed into the tree to his rear. According to the principles of the Code Duello, Burr was perfectly justified in taking deadly aim at Hamilton and firing to kill. The wounded Hamilton was taken to the home of William Byard Jr. in New York, where he received communion from Bishop Benjamin Moore. He died the next day after seeing his wife Elizabeth and their children, in the presence of more than 20 friends and family members. He was buried in the Trinity Churchyard Cemetery in Manhattan. His political ally, Gouverneur Morris, gave the eulogy at his funeral and established a private fund to support his widow and children.
Burr was charged with murder in New York and New Jersey, but neither charge reached trial. In Bergen County, New Jersey, a grand jury indicted him for murder in November 1804, but the New Jersey Supreme Court squashed it in motion for Colonel Ogden. Burr fled to St. Simons Island, Georgia, and stayed at the plantation of Pierce Butler, but he soon returned to Washington, D.C. to complete his term as vice president. He presided over the impeachment trial of Samuel Chase, quote, with the dignity and impartiality of an angel, but with the rigor of a devil, end quote. According to a Washington newspaper, Burr's heartfelt farewell speech to the Senate in March 1805 moved some of his harshest critics to tears.
With his political career apparently over, Burr went west where he became involved in filibuster plans, which some later claimed were intended to establish a new independent empire carved out of the Louisiana Territory. General James Wilkinson worked with him, but he had a change of heart and betrayed their plans to President Jefferson. Burr allegedly tried to recruit William Eaton, and Eaton accused him in letters of Jefferson that led to Burr's arrest and trial for treason. He was acquitted of all charges, but his reputation was further damaged, and he spent the following years in Europe. He finally returned to New York City in 1812, where he resumed his law practice and spent the remainder of his life in relative obscurity.